on today. High of 75. Hopefully that will help dry things out a bit. Partly cloudy, cooler, low of 50. Tomorrow, not as warm. Considerable cloudiness, 67, but look out along the lakefront. Much cooler, 53 overnight. And on Sunday, we'll have clouds, breezy, couple of showers and a thunderstorm, and a high of 67. Currently, we have 62 at O'Hare. Your next news update is at 7 with breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. Let freedom ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. And yesterday evening, CNN featured a panel discussion on the COVID-19 pandemic that included future chair of the Al Gore Fear Studies Department at Harvard University, Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, and Greta, they started out because, she's, a world-renowned activist.
How dare you?
Don't say that sarcastically.
Oh, no. Well, so they had her on, and they acted as if, she and her dad self-quarantined for 2 weeks because she had COVID. But did she really have COVID?
Well, first of all, we still haven't gotten tested because here you don't get tested unless you're in need of medical help. So of course I don't know if I've had it, but I isolated myself anyway, and because it is the right thing to do.
She's a true hero, Dad.
No, I'm
you.
a proponent of her isolating herself, actually.
It
was great to have her there because otherwise nobody would have tuned in to listen to Sanjay Gupta and a couple of other, Kathleen Sebelius, dusting her off, breaking her out of the emergency glass. This is the whole reason they had Greta Thunberg. They didn't get PPP. They didn't get PPP money, so they got to figure out a way to generate revenue somehow.
And they're using her as, a voice for the children or people her age to, save grandma, save grandpa.
Many people don't even notice that they have symptoms, and then they might spread the virus without even knowing it. Mm-hmm. And there is.
I'm sorry. Are we listening to a 17-year-old know-nothing talk about infectious disease?
Yes.
I'm not. No, I'm not. CNN viewers can.
It was awful. And that's her 16th town hall, and they dragged her out, and I thought, you got to be kidding me.
How dare you?
A fish out of water. It was so stupid.
She is an exemplar, though, of leftist thinking. She has been fully lobotomized with leftism. Our friend over at Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill, had a good piece on this, too. The perversion of the left's messaging on this. Going back to work is being sent off to die. And that's the same argument that's being made by Democrat socialist politicians here. There's actually campaign slogans, as Brendan O'Neill mentions. Pseudo-Marxists at Novara Media: back to work, catch the virus, save the billionaires. Because for leftists, the market is just a little more than a conspiracy in which the filthy rich kill.
Well, that's the same
kill
thing.
their
Pritzker's
employees
saying,
to make money.
You open up Madison County, you're a murderer. You're going to kill people. You're going to have blood on your hands. It's the same pablum. It's ridiculous.
Going back to Brendan O'Neill, they're ramping up the culture of fear in a desperate effort to preserve their bizarre, historically unprecedented anti-work outlook as a good and noble thing. Actual facts, like the fact that under 40s have made up 0.75% of the deaths from COVID, don't get so much as a look in. No, keep all workers at home, even the fit, healthy young ones. And the response from the vanguard class there, like here, this is almost verbatim what Ocasio-Cortez said. Owen Jones, who's a columnist for The Guardian: the working class is being ordered to return to their function as generators of revenue. That's how he describes people's desire to go back to work. O'Neill writing, only someone completely removed from the reality and aspirations of working class communities could describe work in such dehumanizing terms. Precisely. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Rupert Darwell, strategy consultant and policy analyst, former special advisor to the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, and author of The Age of Global Warming, a history, as well as Green Tyranny, exposing the totalitarian roots of the climate industrial complex. Rupert, thanks for joining us. I guess, given the books that you've authored, we should let you have a shot at Greta Thunberg before we move on to more heady matters.
Yeah, I loved. Great to be joining you both. I loved that intro on Greta. The interesting thing to me, though, is that Greta is Swedish, and as we know, but Sweden is arguably the only country in the Western world that has adopted a scientifically sensible and risk-acknowledged way of dealing with COVID, which is not to lock down the economy and to let it spread and let its population acquire herd immunity, which apparently Stockholm is well on the way to doing. So Greta Thunberg could have provided a really valuable lesson to the viewers of CNN on the merits of the Swedish way. The fact she didn't says an awful lot about her and who's running her.
Well, she blamed the government in Sweden for not having enough testing. Did you notice that? Did you watch it last night?
I did do that. I don't watch Emetics. I shouldn't say that.
Why would you? Why would anybody? Yeah, exactly. Please say you didn't. I'd have less respect for you if you did, actually. Let's expand this out to Brendan O'Neill's point and the point that others have made. This notion that being ideologically committed to a lockdown is being ideologically committed to the working class.
Yeah, I find that absolutely. I find that the lockdown mantra absolutely extraordinary. There's a very powerful piece, not by someone who I normally agree with, and I don't necessarily agree with his reasoning, but Larry Summers, who was Bill Clinton's last Treasury Secretary, wasn't he? Right. But he says the pandemic is a huge historic event, and it will lead to an Asian century. Basically, the West will be left in the ditch. And I think that is, sadly, the case for Western Europe. I think, so, as people grow older, and you can tell when you're old and you suffer ill health, you get a bout of ill health, you never recover the way you were before. And if you look at Europe, after the big recession of 2008, 2009, Europe didn't really recover. It's basically been flatlining. And I'm afraid of what we're experiencing now, I think it will just be a sort of slump. It'll just carry on. Whereas in America, you have a president he's 73, but his vigor and energy and his desire to keep his belief that the future is more important than the present is, I think America will pull itself out of the COVID slump. But I fear for Europe. I think Europe's going to just turn into a series of zombie economies.
Well, it'll be interesting because you may have it be quite uneven. You mentioned Sweden as compared to perhaps some other Western European countries, and perhaps the same in the United States. You're going to have states that are growing in population and are sensible with respect to fiscal policy that are attracting, which is why they're growing in population. And they will recover and be robust again. The Texases and the Floridas of the world, the Illinois and the New Yorks and the Californias, maybe less so.
I think that's the advantage of a federal system, that you can see what works and what is crazy. The other country one should mention that seems in Western Europe that seems to be getting it right is Switzerland, which is removing its lockdown. So I've made a generalization, but I should say Britain is one of the worst. I mean, is really one of the worst. The fear that's induced in the population, they don't want the lockdown eased up at all. Vast majorities, they think the lockdown restrictions should be harsher. And there's this thing about, you can't risk children going back to school, even though children, so we learn, not only don't get COVID, but don't transmit it. And so there's incredibly low risk. We have no sense of risk in our society and how to handle it. Like a spike in the death rate leads to fear amongst the general population, and you can't live your life in fear. And the societies that live in fear the whole time are basically societies that are just going nowhere. They have no future if you're frightened the whole time.
A part of what you're hearing in the discussion here is just, the generational reflection, which is, gosh, I mean, World War II generation compared to the people in charge now, and the reaction you're getting from younger people who would have, been sort of the parallel to the younger generation that went off to war in World War II. I wonder, I mean, the land of Winston Churchill, I wonder if you're hearing some of those same sort of wistful, nostalgic references to the World War II generation as compared to what England has become.
Well, we had VE Day last week, and that was a reminder. One of the things that I find really strange about, certainly in Britain, is the reaction of young people, because they are effectively immune. They don't. Their chances of getting the virus and suffering anything really bad from it are really tiny, and yet they are some of the most fervent lockdowners. I find that I simply can't explain it. I can't rationalize it. That they have become gripped with fear, and if young people are gripped with fear, that's a problem in itself. And I think it's partly because we have the misfortune to have a prime minister who not only contracted the virus but became very seriously ill from it. And Boris Johnson's 55, and then he was on a ventilator and nearly died. And that has accentuated the sort of narrative of fear that pervades British society. And there isn't the get up and go. There's been no spontaneous demonstrations that you've had in Illinois and other parts of the United States, and in Michigan, noticeably, of people saying this is too much, this is an infringement of basic freedom. There's another point that I find really interesting in all this, if you like, an ideological point, that the left and if you like, the mainstreams all say that the libertarians and conservatives don't believe in society. They're just purely for the atomistic individual and the selfish gene and so forth. Actually, it's the libertarians, it's the conservatives who want people to be allowed to go out into society because that's where we belong. And this inhumane locking up of people in tiny little units and separating them, which the collectivists and the left are now inflicting and imposing on people, is profoundly antisocial and anti the individual.
Well, right. I mean, we're if we're not there, we're nearing the Orwellian territory of freedom is slavery. I mean, that's essentially the argument I'm hearing from the left.
Yes, that's right. And this, and as you pointed out, this idea that work, there is a dignity to work, there is a dignity to labour, which the left have completely stripped away, and they just feel that people should just get money for nothing. Absolutely, and there is no, and that is why I think Larry Summers, if you like, in the big picture, Larry Summers is onto something in saying that the pandemic could well lead to an Asian century, because they don't believe that. They don't think that money grows. You just get money for just sitting on your, sitting at home. And that will be the future. I think there is, and I think to be political about this, I think what November 2020 will be about when you guys go vote, that will be the decision point whether America is going to go join the declinists across the Atlantic, or pick herself up and say we have a future. Our best days are yet to come.
He is Rupert Darwell, strategy consultant and policy analyst, former special advisor to the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, author of The Age of Global Warming, A History, and Green Tyranny, Exposing the Totalitarian Roots of the Climate Industrial Complex. Rupert Darwell, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial